A shriek that could shatter glass echoed through Willowbrook Heights as Karen Fitzgerald stormed out of her colonial-style house, her perfectly styled hair whipping in the morning breeze. Her mouth fell open in absolute horror as she stared at her freshly landscaped circular driveway, where an enormous prefabricated shed now sat like a beached whale. The shed completely blocked her garage doors, her mailbox, and even partially obstructed her front entrance. In the distance, the thunderous whop-whop-whop of a cargo helicopter faded as it disappeared over the tree line. My Ford F-150 rolled slowly past her property, and I couldn't resist giving her a friendly wave through the open window. The look on her face was worth every penny I'd spent on that airlift. Let me back up and explain how we got here. My name is Marcus Chen, and I'm a software engineer who values peace and quiet above all else. 3 years ago, I purchased a small off-grid cabin at the very edge of Willowbrook Heights, technically within the HOA boundaries but far enough away that I thought I'd avoid the suburban drama. The cabin sits on 5 acres of wooded land, accessible only by a private gravel road that's been there since the 1950s. According to county records, that road predates the entire subdivision by decades. Everything was perfect until 6 months ago when Karen Fitzgerald bought the empty lot adjacent to my access road. Karen wasn't just any neighbor. She was the self-appointed supreme commander of the Willowbrook Heights Homeowners Association, a position she wielded like a medieval monarch with her scepter. Within days of closing on her property, she began what I can only describe as a systematic campaign to make my life miserable. It started with small complaints. My truck was too loud when I drove past her lot. The gravel for my road was supposedly damaging her grass, even though she hadn't planted any yet. She claimed the occasional deer that wandered from my property onto hers were somehow my responsibility. I tried to be neighborly, really I did. I even offered to pay for a fence between our properties. She refused, saying she had other plans. Those other plans became crystal clear one Friday evening when I returned from a week-long business trip. There, squatting like an oversized toad directly across my access road, was a massive prefabricated storage shed. Not near the road, not beside it, but completely blocking it. The structure was at least 12 feet wide and 16 feet long, painted an aggressive shade of HOA-approved beige. A shiny new padlock secured its doors, and a laminated sign proclaimed private property of K. Fitzgerald no trespassing. I parked on the main road and walked the quarter-mile to her house, trying to keep my temper in check. Karen answered the door with a smile that could only be described as predatory. She wore her HOA president badge like a sheriff's star, and her voice dripped with false sweetness as she spoke. "Oh, Marcus," she said, tilting her head like a confused poodle. "I'm so sorry, but that road of yours was never approved by the HOA Architectural Committee. I've reviewed our bylaws extensively, and all structures and improvements require proper approval. Since your road lacks the necessary permits, I'm afraid it's not a legal access point. My shed is perfectly within my property lines." I explained calmly that the road existed before the HOA, that I had an easement, and that she was blocking my only access to my cabin. She responded by handing me a 30-page document about HOA regulations and suggested I find alternative access through the woods. "Maybe you could build a nice walking path," she suggested with mock helpfulness. "Of course, you'd need to submit plans to the Architectural Committee first. We meet once a month, and the next meeting is in 3 weeks. The next morning, I drove to the county courthouse and spent hours researching property records. Sure enough, my easement was clearly documented, dated 1957, and completely legal. Armed with this information, I attended the next HOA board meeting. To my dismay, I discovered that Karen had recently stacked the board with her friends. There was Margaret Thompson, who ran the neighborhood book club that was really just a wine and gossip session. Harold Winters, whose main qualifications seemed to be agreeing with everything Karen said. And Patricia Chen, no relation, who spent most of the meeting glaring at me as if my existence personally offended her. I presented my case clearly and professionally. I showed the easement documents, the county maps, even aerial photographs from the 1960s showing the road. The board listened with expressions ranging from bored to openly hostile. When I finished, Karen stood up and delivered a speech about maintaining neighborhood standards and preventing degradation of property values. The board voted 4-1 against requiring her to move the shed, with only Tom Pearson, the lone voice of reason, voting in my favor. Frustrated but not defeated, I hired Rebecca Martinez, the best property lawyer in the county. She reviewed my documents and practically laughed at the situation. "This is the clearest easement case I've seen in 20 years, she told me. "That shed is absolutely illegal. We can get an injunction and force her to move it." But I had a better idea brewing in my mind. You see, Rebecca had found something interesting in the county code. Section 47.3 clearly stated that encroaching structures could be removed by non-destructive means at the expense of the property owner who held the easement. I asked Rebecca to clarify what exactly constituted non-destructive means. She grinned and said, "Well, as long as you don't damage the structure and return it to the owner's property, you're within your rights. The code doesn't specify how you move it." That's when I called my old college roommate, Jake Morrison, who now ran a heavy lift logistics company. His company specialized in moving unusual cargo, like relocating historic buildings or placing AC units on skyscrapers. When I explained the situation, he couldn't stop laughing. Jake's crew came out to survey the situation. They took measurements, checked weight distributions, and calculated lift requirements. The shed was substantial but well within their capabilities. Jake quoted me a price that made my eyes water, but then he added, "You know what, for the entertainment value alone, I'll give you the friends and family discount. Plus, I want to see this Karen's face when we do it." We scheduled the operation for the following Saturday morning. Jake's team handled all the permits, filed flight plans with the FAA, and even notified local law enforcement about the unusual but completely legal operation. I made sure to have Rebecca present with all the documentation, just in case things got heated. The night before, I barely slept, alternating between excitement and worry about what we were about to do. Saturday dawned clear and calm, perfect conditions for flying. Jake's crew arrived at 6 a.m. with 2 trucks full of equipment. They worked with military precision, attaching heavy-duty straps and reinforced lifting points to the shed. By 7:30, the distinctive thrum of rotor blades announced the arrival of the helicopter, a massive Sikorsky S-64 sky crane that looked like a mechanical dragonfly against the morning sky. Karen must have been alerted by the noise because she burst out of her house in a silk bathrobe and designer slippers, her face a mask of rage and disbelief. She screamed something that was lost in the rotor wash as the helicopter descended and the crew attached the cables. "What are you doing?" she shrieked, running toward the shed. "This is theft. This is vandalism. I'm calling 911 right now." Rebecca stepped forward with a folder of documents, having to shout over the helicopter noise. "Ma'am, this is a legal removal of an encroaching structure. Here's the county code, the easement documentation, and the permits for this operation. Your shed is being returned to your property as required by law." Karen snatched the papers, her hands shaking as she read. Meanwhile, the helicopter pilot got the all-clear signal, and the shed began to rise. It was surreal watching that beige monstrosity lift into the air like something out of a movie. The pilot was incredibly skilled, keeping the shed level as it rose 50, then 100 feet. Neighbors had come out of their houses, many still in pajamas, recording the spectacle on their phones. The helicopter banked slowly, carrying its unusual cargo in a wide arc toward Karen's property. The crew had measured everything perfectly. The shed descended with graceful precision into the center of Karen's circular driveway, landing with barely a thump. The placement was strategic and devastating. Her garage was completely inaccessible, her decorative fountain was blocked, and the shed doors faced her living room windows. Even her mailbox was obstructed. The helicopter released the cables and thundered away, leaving an eerie silence in its wake. Karen's shriek broke that silence. She ran to her driveway, circling the shed like an angry hornet. "You can't do this," she screamed. "This is my property. Move it back right now." I calmly informed her that it was indeed her property, her shed, and now her problem. If she wanted it moved, she was welcome to hire her own helicopter service. The best part was when Harold Winters from the HOA board arrived, took one look at the situation, and immediately started photographing the shed. "Karen," he said with barely concealed glee, "this shed violates at least 6 HOA regulations. It's blocking your driveway, which violates Section 12.4. It's not on an approved foundation, violating Section 8.1. And the placement disrupts the visual harmony of the streetscape, Section 3.7. As a board member, I have no choice but to issue citations." By noon, The police had come and gone. Officer Daniel Brooks reviewed all the documentation, watched the video Jake's crew had recorded of the operation, and declared everything completely legal. "The shed hasn't been damaged," he told Karen. "It's been returned to your property as required by the easement enforcement. This is a civil matter, and from what I can see, Mr. Chen has followed the law to the letter." The story exploded on social media within hours. Someone had live-streamed the entire airlift, and the video went viral with titles like "Epic Revenge on HOA Karen" and "Helicopter Justice Served Cold." News crews showed up by evening, and Karen made the mistake of giving an interview where she came across as even more entitled and ridiculous than reality. She claimed I was a menace to the neighborhood and demanded the HOA take action. The HOA board called an emergency meeting that night. The community room was packed with neighbors, most of whom had suffered under Karen's tyrannical rule at some point. Tom Pearson made a motion to review Karen's actions as HOA president. One by one, neighbors stood up to share their stories. There was the elderly couple she'd fined for having their grandchildren's bicycles visible in their garage. The young family she'd harassed about their vegetable garden. The veteran she'd reported for flying an American flag that was allegedly 2 inches too large. When it came time to address the shed incident, Harold Winters presented his findings. Not only had Karen violated multiple HOA regulations with her shed placement, but she'd also abused her position by blocking a legal easement. The board voted unanimously to fine her $500 per day until the shed was properly relocated. They also scheduled a special election to replace her as president, citing breach of fiduciary duty. The county got involved next. Turns out, Karen had never pulled permits for the shed in the first place. Building Inspector Michael Torres issued additional fines and ordered her to either properly permit the structure or remove it entirely. The placement in her driveway violated setback requirements, and the concrete pad she'd poured to block my road was installed without proper drainage considerations. Karen tried to hire crews to move the shed, but the story had become so infamous that contractors either declined the job or quoted astronomical prices. One contractor told her it would be cheaper to dismantle it and rebuild elsewhere. Her husband, Robert, who'd wisely stayed out of the initial conflict, was seen having heated discussions with her in their driveway, gesturing wildly at the shed that had become a monument to her hubris. "I fixed my road access the Monday after the airlift. A professional grading crew came in, removed the illegal concrete pad, and restored the gravel surface. I made sure to have them install proper drainage and even added some decorative boulders along the edges to prevent future encroachment. The work was done by noon, and I finally had clear access to my cabin again." The HOA special election was held 2 weeks later. Karen didn't even bother to campaign, probably because she knew it was hopeless. Tom Pearson won by a landslide and immediately began reversing years of petty regulations. The atmosphere in the neighborhood changed almost overnight. People started talking to each other again, helping with yard work, having block parties. It was like an oppressive cloud had been lifted. But the real karma came when Karen's employer caught wind of the viral video. She worked as a compliance officer for a large corporation, a job that required good judgment and ethical behavior. The company launched an investigation into whether her actions reflected poorly on their values. The last I heard, she was placed on administrative leave pending review. The fines kept accumulating. Between the HOA, the county, and various legal fees, Karen was looking at tens of thousands of dollars in expenses. The shed remained in her driveway for a full month before she finally had it dismantled piece by piece. The process took 3 days and required a specialized crew. The irony was that it cost her more to remove it than I'd paid to fly it there. 6 months later, a for sale sign appeared in front of Karen's house. The neighborhood grapevine suggested that between the fines, legal fees, and potential job loss, they needed to downsize. Some said they were moving to another state entirely. The house sold quickly to a lovely young couple, who made a point of introducing themselves to everyone and asking about the strange circular mark in their driveway where the shed had sat. Before they moved, someone with a delicious sense of humor spray painted "No-Fly Zone" in large letters on Karen's driveway. It was done with permanent road marking paint, the kind highway crews use. She tried everything to remove it, but those words remained visible even after multiple attempts at power washing and resealing. It became a neighborhood landmark of sorts, a reminder of the day justice was delivered by helicopter. I had the whole incident professionally photographed and created a small framed collage that now hangs in my cabin. The centerpiece is a perfect shot of the shed suspended in mid-air with Karen's horrified face visible in the corner. Below it, I added a small brass plaque that reads, "Sometimes the high road takes a helicopter." It never fails to get a laugh from visitors who ask about it. The final tally of Karen's consequences was staggering. $45,000 in combined fines from the HOA and county. $20,000 in legal fees from her failed attempts to sue me. $8,000 to remove the shed. Her position as HOA president gone. Her reputation destroyed. And ultimately, she was terminated from her job for conduct unbecoming a compliance officer. The last time I saw her, she was directing movers with none of her former imperious attitude. Her shoulders slumped in defeat.